This episode of Brains on Games is a preview of a dexterity game that's just about the fastest one I've ever played. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and this episode we're going to talk about a game that's coming up on Kickstarter very soon. It is a game that was sent to me by the folks over at Moku. It's a game called Moku Tower. This is a super fast dexterity game, and for a game that's in such a beige and brown box, it is a super beautiful game as well. Moku Tower is a game that you can play with between 2 and 6 players. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes to play, and you can play with kids aged 7 and up. Let's take a look at Moku Tower. This is a stacking game, a dexterity game where you're going to be stacking up these big chunks of wood as quickly as you possibly can. You can see maybe on one or both of these cameras that there's all kinds of different planes and angles that make it sit in different ways, which makes it really challenging to get things to balance, of course. So at the start of the game, you're going to have these chunks of wood that are matched up with cards that sort of describe what they look like so that you don't get mixed up later on. You've got a stack of cards. There's 3 stacks of cards, and we'll talk about what each one does during the turn. There's a 4th one. Each player is going to start with 2 of these special function cards, and these are special powers that might make it easier for you to get more points or make it harder for your opponent to get points. One of them, for example, is a tornado card where you'll be able to blow on your opponent's stack of wood as they're building it to try and knock it over or to distract them while they're trying to work. So those cards can be pretty powerful, and it does keep the player sort of involved in the other player's turn as they're playing and stacking. It is a super fast dexterity game because you're going to be using this timer to keep track of timing your turns. And so before you flip over any of the cards to determine what you're going to be stacking up on that base, you've got to flip this sand timer over. As soon as you're done and you've stacked the blocks that you're supposed to, you flip it over and the opponent has however much time would have been left, right? So the faster you are, the less time your opponent is going to have when they're building their tower. On a turn in Moku Tower, you will start by flipping over the sand timer, and once that timer is started, you have to flip over a starting position card. Now, it might be a starting card like this that says you've got to stack up ash and maple and this other sapele, I want to say, that wood is called. I'm not sure how to even pronounce it. The other kind of starting base card, the starting position card, just has the base on it, and there's a little rectangle symbol up here saying that you need to take another card as well. You can't just use the base and get any points for it. In fact, this one's worth 0 points by itself. So you flip over the base card once your timer is going, and then optionally you can choose. Maybe I want to put some extra pieces on. Now I've got 3 extra pieces. That'll give me 3 extra points, but I have to do it within that time limit. Or these super jackpot cards will give you extra points if you do things in a certain way. There's actually a super jackpot card that where you get extra points if you hold the base on your hand while you're building it. So those jackpot cards could be things like use only one hand or use only the palm of your hands. You have to do it like a cat, or pick up the blocks with only 2 of your fingers, which definitely makes things difficult, but it does add more points for you. So if I were to start and then flip over, say I would probably only want to flip over this one card because there's already 3 pieces on it and I am trying to work as quickly as possible. I'm going to grab the ash at the bottom, which is this one, and then I'm going to need to grab the maple, which is right over here, and somehow, I've got to balance these as fast as I can, and this one is really tilty and slanty at the top, so I don't know what the best side is. I'm not going to be able to balance anything else on top of that. And then on top of that, I need this one, this reddish brown one. But there's no way I'm going to be able to get that to stay just because of the way that these blocks are positioned. So if I finish this and I am able to get them stable, I can immediately flip this over, and then the next player is going to have to go, and they'll have only this much time left. If I'm not able to do it and I run out of time, then the next player has a full timer. If I knock it down, the next player gets to decide whether they want to flip it or not. So if I knock it down right away, there's not going to be much sand here in the bottom, so they might not want to flip it and just continue with the time that's left on the top, or they can flip it right away, depending on what's going to give them more time. You keep going around the circle until one person gets to 25 points, and then that's the end of the game. In a two-player game, we did find it challenging to count the points because it was so chaotic and fast. We never had time to really stop and think and count things up. I did at one point have to turn the hourglass sideways to kind of pause the game for a second so we could figure out whether somebody had already won, because we had, both of us, my son and I, had big stacks of cards along the side. What skills are you working on when you play a game of Moku Tower? Well, of course, you're developing those motor skills. You're practicing those motor skills. You have to really have some body awareness and a steady hand to be able to stack these things up, especially if you're only allowed to use your left hand, or you have to balance the base like this while you're stacking them. So that definitely makes things very challenging. Or if somebody's trying to blow your tower over while you're working on it. So it's motor skills for sure. Processing speed is huge in this game. You've got to quickly make decisions. How many of those optional cards am I going to turn over, if any? Because you're balancing out how long it takes you to build your tower versus how many points you're going to get, because you want the next player to have less time if you can. So you've got to think quickly and act quickly and move quickly. These kinds of games with timers like this, I find I often recommend them for kids who are indecisive, or for kids who are maybe a bit perfectionistic, where you have to force yourself in a game like this to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, I guess, so that you can be, this is good enough and now I have to move on so that I'm extra fast. And I think that's a good skill for perfectionistic kids to develop. It is a game that's very tactile. Like it is, I love games where just your senses are engaged in some way, and each of these chunks of wood has a different feel to it. And you're learning about wood grain and things like that, and the different feel and weights of different kinds of wood, which is sort of some factual knowledge that many kids might not necessarily have. So just the tactile elements of the game I really, really like. And then there's the physics of how do you place this in a way that you're going to be able to balance something on top of it. It might not be perfectly flat, but does the next piece have enough friction that it can stay in place, even if it's not perfectly balanced straight up and down? And that is Moku Tower in a nutshell. It's a super fast, chaotic dexterity game where processing speed is really a strong requirement. You also get a little bit of information about different wood grains, and it's the physics of balancing. Thanks so much to the folks over at Moku for sending this game along. If there was anything that I would change about it, it would be to make these little pictures of the wood grain a bit bigger to make it easier to tell the difference between them at a glance, right? Because you're trying to work fast, and sometimes you might have to, one of the special functions cards requires a player to name the wood that's on their tower, which would be very difficult. We had to look very closely at these little circles on the cards to sort of remember which wood was which. But thanks so much to Moku for sending this game. I will put a link to the Kickstarter campaign in the show notes so that you can take a look at that if you want to. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave them in the comment section below the video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go, and the previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.